The husband of jailed mother Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe last night filed a special request to the UN, asking for it to work with the UK and Iran to see her freed.
Her husband, Richard Ratcliffe, said an urgent intervention is needed to secure her release from prison. He also warned it was inevitable. His wife would face an autumn in court unless Britain and other states called out hostage-taking as a crime.
We're now joined by Rebecca Ratcliffe, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's sister-in-law. Hi, Rebecca. I guess just to begin with, can you tell us how Nazanin is doing at the moment? Have you had any updates on her condition recently?
Yeah, Nazanin is okay. She's at home with her mum and dad in Tehran. She's obviously up and down a little bit with her mood, which has been the case since she's been on home arrest for the last year now. Still very much missing her life back in London with Gabriella and with Richard, though.
So this request that Richard has made to the UN is to look for more kind of global cooperation in trying to get Nazanin released. You know, tell us a bit more about that process and kind of what and how effective you hope it might be.
Yeah, so it's our family's belief, because of what Nazanin's been told and what's come out over the last 5-6 years now, that Nazanin's always been taken as leverage for a historical debt between the two countries. And the importance of this UN investigation is to show that that's the case, that it's about leverage, and so that the British government also have responsibility in this case. It's not just up to the Iranians to solve it. The British government have responsibility to try and come to agreements and solve this debt issue so that Nazanin will be released.
And what would you like to see the British government do? I understand it's about £400 million, this debt that is being negotiated between Iran and the UK for some tanks that weren't delivered back in the 1970s. What would you like to see the government do on this?
Well, it's a little bit complicated in that this is a historical debt, and of course now there's a certain amount of interest that's accrued. So there's obviously arguments and squabbles about how much they need to repay. An international court has found them guilty and they do need to repay it, and they've always accepted they need to repay it. But unfortunately, there's ongoing court case squabbles, and nothing is getting resolved. And in fact, the last time it's actually taken to court was before the pandemic. So meanwhile, Nazanin's just sitting, left in waiting, her life completely on hold. And we urge both parties to get behind the table and resolve this issue, because Nazanin and Ushe, the other British Iranians, will not be released until that happens.
Of course, the British government deny, in fact, and the Iranian government, that she is any kind of sort of pawn or chip in this kind of barter over the debts. I mean, as a family, how do you cope with this on a sort of day-to-day basis? I think the whole nation follows this case so closely. You know, we were all so hopeful at the beginning of the year when we thought she'd be released. Obviously, then in April there was this new year-long sentence for propaganda, I think it was, that they said. So, I mean, what are the coping mechanisms that you've had to develop?
There are times, as you can imagine, it's quite crushing. You know, when we got that new conviction. As yet, she hasn't been taken back to prison, but our feeling is that if nothing happens and resolved in the summer, that they may try and push for that in Iran. We don't know. It is difficult. We were, we were having conversations behind the scenes with the Foreign Secretary and the Foreign Office, and they were hopeful that there was going to be release in sight over the last couple of months. So we've been keeping quiet. It looks like those negotiations have fallen down again. And again, it's just, where do you go with that? You keep having to lift yourself back up again, and fight again. And it is all consuming. It's very tiring.
How have you found the response from the government, from the Foreign Office, from the Foreign Secretary? You know, how supportive and helpful have they been?
I think in their defence, all the foreign secretaries that we've met, and we've met quite a few over the last 5 years, there's been quite a few changes. And in fact, Foreign Office staff have always been genuinely, empathic of what we're going through and sympathetic. The problem is their approach doesn't seem to be very fruitful to us, and we still remain very much in the same situation as we were 5.5 years ago, and there's a little girl who's grown up without her mother.
And Rebecca, obviously Iran has a new president, Ebrahim Raisi, viewed as a bit more of a hardliner. Does that give you more cause for concern that there may be more obstacles in the way of Nazanin's release?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think at the point where they were trying to negotiate, we had a previous government, then the government changes, and both parties have to try and build those rapport with each other. And there's obviously mutual distrust on both sides, and hardliners probably even more so. But that doesn't mean to say that negotiations shouldn't start happening and conversations. They need to get behind a table and try and resolve this issue, because until this issue has been resolved, Nazanin's going to stay in prison and more British nationals are going to be taken. And probably we need help from the international community, which is where the UN sort of can help coordinate things.
Have you had a response from the UN yet? Have they given you kind of any indication as to their level of involvement or what they think they might be able to do?
So back in 2016, her case was looked at as a case for as not quite torture, but detention, arbitrary detention, and Iran was found guilty, and they were very, publicly came out in support of us. We haven't, since filing this new complaint and asking them to look into it for effectively arbitrary detention for leverage, i.e. hostage taking, and calling out torture. We haven't had a response from them, but we've only just put that application in.
And you mentioned Gabriella, obviously your niece, Nazanin's daughter. How is she doing? She's 7 years old now.
7 years old, enjoying summer holidays. They've all come up to stay with us for a while, all cousins together. I mean, like a typical little 7-year-old, enjoying Minecraft and going out and playing friends and stuff and eating lots of junk. But there are times when, she really struggles with not having her mummy, and bedtimes is a big one, and definitely trying to look for attention from the female members of the family, because she needs that mummy figure in her life. And it's heartbreaking for Nazanin to see me and my mum being that mummy figure when it should be Nazanin.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca Ratcliffe, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and hopefully we'll keep in touch with you on this story and follow the developments. Thank you.